human soldier and the galaxy's deadliest alien general face each other on a battlefield frozen by a ceasefire. One moment of contact sparks a forbidden connection that defies centuries of war. Their bond could either shatter the galaxy or ignite a love powerful enough to change everything. The ceasefire had arrived like a hesitant whisper across a battlefield that had long forgotten silence. Human and alien fleets hovered in cold stillness above the fractured moon of Vesher. Their weapons cooling but their grudges burning hotter than any star. For years, the war had carved scars into planets, rewritten borders, and devoured millions. Those who survived did not believe peace was possible. They only believed in endurance. Among them was a human soldier named Eric Hale, hardened by too many campaigns, too many funerals, too many promises broken by fire. Eric had fought long enough to know that war usually ended not with a treaty, but with exhaustion. Yet when command ordered him to cross into enemy territory for a controlled ceasefire inspection, he felt something shift inside him. Not fear, not suspicion, something closer to inevitability. As though every step he took toward the alien military outpost was guided by a thread already pulled tight by fate. The alien facility stood silent under the gray glow of Vesher 4's fractured horizon. Its architecture was sharp, crystalline, and alive with faint bioluminescent veins that pulsed with a heartbeat not its own. Eric entered with cautious calculation, expecting an escort, an armed patrol, anyone to meet him. Instead, the corridors stretched empty, echoing with the low hum of a system malfunctioning. He soon understood why. A collapsed bulkhead had torn through the structure, and several rooms were in disarray. The ceasefire had halted the fighting, but it hadn't stopped the aftershocks of previous bombardments. Debris littered the floor, and a faint trail of shimmering violet blood led deeper inside. Eric followed it. 5 minutes later, he found her. General Saraxis Vale, the most feared commander of the alien dominion, lay half-buried under twisted metal, her armor fractured, her breathing uneven. She had been a phantom on the battlefield, a legend spoken with equal parts dread and admiration. Many believed she was unkillable. Others believed she was not a single being, but an identity passed across generations. Eric saw the truth. She was mortal. Strong, yes. Proud, unquestionably. But wounded, alone, and on the edge of consciousness. Instinct told him to leave her. Training told him to restrain her. Strategy told him this was the perfect moment to shift the war in humanity's favor. But something deeper, older, overrode it all. He approached carefully, his steps measured, his posture unthreatening. She watched him through half-lidded eyes, glowing like molten amber. Yet they carried none of the fury the stories claimed. Only exhaustion, only pain, only the quiet, stubborn refusal to let death claim her so easily. Eric freed her from the debris, despite knowing she could turn on him the moment she recovered. Her breathing steadied as he treated the cracks in her armor and slowed the violet bleeding with a sealant patch. It was a strange thing tending to someone raised to exterminate his species. Stranger still was the absence of hatred in her gaze as she studied him through the haze of pain. There was no spoken exchange between them. None was needed. The silence that settled carried more weight than arguments ever could. As her strength slowly returned, Eric examined the ruined facility around them. The outpost had been struck harder than human intelligence had believed. The Dominion had suffered more losses than they admitted. The ceasefire, forced by mutual collapse, suddenly made sense. Yet what unsettled him most was how his priorities shifted. He was no longer analyzing the structure for tactical advantage. He was ensuring it remained stable enough to shelter them both. He was no longer calculating the trajectory of extraction. He was monitoring her breathing, waiting for signs of distress. General Saraxis rose to her feet slowly, her height surpassing his by nearly 2 heads. Her armor's luminous patterns flickered like fading constellations. Even injured, she radiated authority. But beneath that authority, Eric sensed vulnerability, a word that had never been associated with her until this moment. She moved past him, examining the corridor with a limp she tried to hide. The hum of damaged systems pulsed through the walls, and Eric realized their survival required cooperation. The ceasefire meant neither army would intervene. They were alone, two sworn enemies trapped inside a crumbling sanctuary. The irony was almost poetic. A sudden tremor rippled through the structure. The support beams groaned under unseen strain. Instinct pushed them both into motion, navigating deeper into the outpost as collapsing sections forced them forward. Eric stayed behind her, watching her struggle but refusing to let her fall. She did not invite his support, yet she did not reject it when he steadied her. Soon they reached the central chamber, a vast hall with broken screens floating like shattered glass suspended in zero-gravity pockets. Here, the outpost's tactical core once pulsed with strategic brilliance. Now it flickered with dying light. It was in this room, surrounded by the ghosts of war, that the truth settled heavily between them. The war had stolen too much from both sides. Both had buried comrades, entire divisions, entire histories. General Saraxis had likely lost more than she would ever admit. Eric had lost everything except the uniform on his back. For years, they had been taught to see each other as monsters. Yet standing together in the fading glow, they resembled anything but monsters. The silence grew different. Not awkward, not hostile. Something gentle, unspoken, and fragile. Eric sensed a shift in her posture, a softening that defied her reputation. She regarded him not as an enemy, but as someone who had chosen compassion when cruelty would have been easier. For the first time in years, she did not feel alone. For the first time in years, neither did he. Outside, the ceasefire held. Inside, a connection formed in the shadows of ruin, a connection forbidden by their nations, their duties, and the galaxy itself. Yet in that moment, none of it mattered. Something unfamiliar pulsed between them, growing steadily, quietly, like new life blooming in the cracks left by devastation. They were enemies by command, but fate had other plans. The hours stretched endlessly as Eric and Saraxis moved through the outpost, navigating corridors weakened by bombardment and unstable energy conduits. Their alliance was unspoken, yet undeniable. Each step required trust, each breath a silent acknowledgement that the other could easily betray them, and yet did not. The alien general's presence was overwhelming, her aura of command spilling into every corner they passed. Despite the centuries of enmity drilled into their species, Eric felt something else taking root: fascination. Curiosity turned to admiration, admiration to an unspoken longing that neither dared to name. He had encountered enemies before, some human, some alien, all driven by hatred or desperation. None had compelled him to pause, to reflect, to feel. Saraxis did. Her movements were precise, measured, even as the damage slowed her steps. She did not need assistance, yet accepted it without question. Eric noticed the subtle signals of her body language, the way her luminous eyes lingered on him for a fraction longer than necessary, the way her breathing seemed to synchronize with his. It was disorienting, alarming even, because this bond had no precedent. Humans did not connect with their adversaries in such ways, and the Dominion trained its warriors to destroy compassion. Still, there it was, growing between them like a fragile ember refusing to die in the wreckage of war. They reached a chamber filled with the remnants of alien communication arrays, wires sparking and panels shattered. Eric set to work securing the failing systems to prevent a catastrophic overload. Saraxis assisted with deft movements, her alien physiology giving her abilities humans could not match. Yet she allowed him to lead, silently acknowledging his command in this moment. The act of cooperation was electrifying. Every adjustment of a panel, every recalibration of the system, became an unspoken dialogue. They shared glances, breaths, and moments of hesitation that were pregnant with understanding. Neither needed words. Silence carried more weight than any conversation could. As repairs progressed, The emotional tension became almost unbearable. Eric realized he was aware of her presence, even when she was not in his direct line of sight. Every subtle shift, every sound she made in movement, registered with a precision born of instinct and adrenaline. Saraxis, for her part, appeared equally attuned, sensing his focus and responding with measured gestures. It was as if the battlefield had receded entirely, leaving only the two of them in a space where time slowed and nothing existed but the fragile bond that had begun to form. The ceasefire outside was holding, but the threat of renewed attack lingered like a storm on the horizon. Neither side trusted the other, and neither truly trusted the tenuous connection they had forged. Yet the very act of survival had created a fragile intimacy. Eric had long believed that war eroded empathy, yet here it had forced him to confront it directly. Saraxis had been trained to eliminate humans without hesitation, yet she allowed herself to be influenced by him in ways that contradicted every command, every instinct she had honed over decades. The irony was not lost on either of them. It created a tension that was both thrilling and terrifying. Night, or what passed for night in the fractured lighting of the outpost, fell slowly. Eric watched as Saraxis adjusted the remaining power conduits, her elongated fingers moving with grace and precision. The glow of her eyes reflected the flickering lights, and he was struck by how alien she looked, yet somehow profoundly human in her vulnerability. For the first time, he considered the cost of victory beyond strategy and politics. If the war ended tomorrow, what would remain of the soldiers on both sides? What would remain of the hearts that had been hardened by centuries of conflict? The answers seemed distant, yet in the presence of Saraxis, they became immediate, pressing, unavoidable. A sudden tremor ran through the outpost, caused by a partial collapse of the ceiling. Instinct propelled Eric forward to steady her, and in that moment, their proximity became intimate without intention. Her breath brushed against his armor, her weight pressed against his, and for a heartbeat, the war faded entirely. It was not desire as he had known it in fleeting moments before. It was something deeper, something anchored in survival, trust, and recognition of shared fragility. They were enemies, yet in that space, they were allies, confidants, and perhaps something more. Saraxis allowed a rare pause, one of observation rather than command. She studied him, and he studied her, acknowledging without words the impossibility of what was happening. Every instinct screamed to maintain distance, yet every fiber of their being leaned forward, hungry for connection. The alien general's mind was a fortress, yet cracks had formed where his presence reached. Eric felt his own resolve soften in parallel. The war had forced them together, yet this bond, however forbidden, was not manufactured by circumstance. It was authentic, dangerous, and irrevocable. Hours passed with them, maintaining the systems and tending to structural weaknesses, and each act of cooperation became a subtle dialogue of intention and acknowledgement. Small gestures, a hand steadying a panel, a touch to guide a joint movement, accumulated into a rhythm neither had experienced before. It was a dangerous rhythm, one that could not exist beyond the walls of the damaged outpost. Both understood the implications. To act on their feelings outside would be seen as betrayal, yet to deny them entirely seemed equally impossible. By the time the systems stabilized enough to prevent immediate collapse, exhaustion pressed on them. They had survived because of mutual effort, and in surviving, they had discovered an unexpected truth. Survival alone was no longer enough. There was a longing that could not be ignored, a recognition that the other's presence had altered something fundamental within them. Saraxis's glowing eyes met Eric's one final time as they surveyed the repaired systems. There was gratitude there, yes, but also the acknowledgement of something more potent, connection. It was not love yet, but it was a bridge that could lead to it, should circumstances allow. Outside, the ceasefire continued to hold tenuously, yet the war's shadow lingered. Both knew they could not remain here indefinitely. They could not fully abandon their respective duties, nor could they ignore the emotions that had begun to anchor themselves to every movement, every glance, every breath shared between them. The future remained uncertain, as did the choices they would face once they left the fragile safety of the outpost. Yet in that moment, neither wanted to consider the consequences. They had discovered something rare amidst the carnage: understanding, trust, and a spark that promised more than mere survival. As they prepared to depart the chamber, Eric felt the weight of inevitability settle over him. The bond they had forged would not fade with the outpost walls. It would follow them, challenge them, and perhaps redefine the very war that had brought them together. For the first time in his career, he realized that strategy alone could not dictate outcomes. Hearts mattered, even in war. And for Saraxis, the general who had been taught to see humans as enemies, the same realization took root in the quiet strength of her gaze. They were leaving the outpost as allies, yet both understood that outside awaited a galaxy still entrenched in conflict. How they would navigate it, whether the bond would survive orders and expectations, remained unknown. What was certain was that neither would forget the other, and the connection born of survival had already begun to reshape what each believed possible. Something unprecedented had begun, a thread that might one day end the war, or ignite a rebellion that neither human nor alien had anticipated. The war outside the outpost had resumed. The fragile ceasefire shattered as fleets clashed in the void. Explosions rippled through the atmosphere of Vesher, echoing across the fractured terrain. Yet within the ruined corridors of the alien facility, Eric and Saraxis moved with precision, their bond tested by the immediacy of survival and the unrelenting pressure of duty. The connection that had grown between them in the quiet moments of repair and shared vulnerability was now forced into action, no longer a subtle undercurrent, but a driving force against the chaos surrounding them. Every decision carried consequences, every movement carried risk. Their objective was simple yet perilous: escape the outpost and reach a communication array that could warn both sides of a catastrophic chain reaction from damaged alien weapon systems. The corridors trembled under bombardment, fires flaring in bursts that painted their surroundings in violent reds and oranges. Eric felt the familiar edge of danger sharpen in his mind, but it was tempered by the presence of Saraxis. Her movements were decisive, commanding, yet tempered by the awareness of his proximity. Every gesture, every glance, carried unspoken coordination. The war demanded precision, but their cooperation had begun to transcend tactics. It was instinctual, intimate, and undeniably connected. As they progressed, they encountered resistance. Alien soldiers loyal to Saraxis's command tried to stop them, unable to comprehend why their general would allow a human to accompany her. Eric moved with efficiency,